If you know exactly what you should be doing to get coaching clients, yet you're not consistently doing it, why is that we can have that clear plan, but it can be so hard to implement in practice? That's why today I'm excited to be joined by Rebecca Liljendahl, who is a habit specialist. So excited you are here, Rebecca. Cannot wait for this conversation personally, as well as I'm sure the listeners too, because our habits really do transform our lives. And I know that from my daily yoga. I started it by signing a contract. It wasn't really a contract, that sounds a bit official. Signing a 365-day commitment to practice yoga each day. And I drew out this really lovely picture with the word yoga and 365 little colored squares to color in. And once I'd started, I wanted to color in a square every single day. And even if I just did it for 2 minutes, I could color it in. I just want to have a tiny practice. And it's the one habit that I feel like I've absolutely mastered due to that process. And I don't know if I've been successful with much else. And actually, sorry, one more habit that I really did well back in the day was joining this group, which was you either post on social media 5 days a week and share your link in this WhatsApp group, essentially. And if you don't share your link, you get kicked out of this group for an entire month and you get zero support for the month. So I had just started my business and obviously hated posting online, as most of us do when we start our business. But I knew that I would get no other support for the month if I didn't do that commitment. So again, I think I must be one of these ones that when I set a commitment, and if there's a consequence, in other words, my picture's going to be messed up for my yoga, or I'm going to get kicked out of this group if I don't post on social, it really works for me. But there's so many other habits I can't seem to master. So cannot wait this conversation, Rebecca. Do share a bit about you and how you got into habits.
Joe. Let's pick some of those habits and we'll work on them live in this session. I think that would be a fun thing to do. First of all, I would challenge you on that because you've already built a fantastic business. So there must be a lot of habits going on under the surface that you don't recognize as habits. And I think that's the main thing. We have this broad word, habits, don't we? But we use it for so many things that aren't actually habitual. And those things that just disappear, that we just do, we don't see those things as habits, but they actually are. So how did I get into this? Well, my background is corporate HR. I started in well-being pre-pandemic. So that was early on. And I noticed working with the most amazing people and hearing brilliant talks on nutrition, on sleep, on movement. And then I would watch people, and including myself, we would go away hyped up, ready to do the thing that was going to change our lives. And then it just didn't happen. It felt like, what is going on here? This is so frustrating. So I'd already gone back to my roots in psychology and started investigating habits. And that process had already started. And then, boom, side punch, knocked us all off our socks, didn't it? Because the pandemic landed and suddenly we were all at home without a single pre-programmed habit. So I designed a 1 hour workshop for the NHS and they took it up. We were all at home in Zoom and that was the first time we'd ever done it. And then that went very well. And I designed it into an 8-week program. So the pandemic was really my springboard to really understand habits and understand how we form them, because we have this amazing blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, love it. And so I guess what I often find if I read a book on habits or something is that I think, oh, well, it's all right for you. You're not the same as me with these terrible habits. You've got this amazing way of sticking to everything you commit to. So is that the case, or have you struggled with this as well?
Yeah, a great question. So let's take you back a little bit further. My first real experience with habits I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome and I wanted to have a baby, desperate to have a baby at that stage of life, and it wasn't happening. And I realized that I'd done my research and I wanted to give up sugar as to help the process. So I went about trying to give up sugar. And this huge motivation of I want to have a baby, which is very clear. That's a very big motivator. I still really struggle to give up sugar. And if I'd have had me, I am now, then, oh my God, I could have done it so much quicker. What I found is this cycle of I'm useless, I can't do this, and now I need to self-soothe myself. I can't do this. And so I'm going back to the sugar, which is my crutch for self-soothing, and their cycle would continue. So I would have made a load of changes to how I went about that. I got there in the end, but it took me a very long time. And I think that's what I was really searching for in this. How can we make it quicker and easier for people to build great habits? Because it really starts damaging your self-worth and your confidence when you're like, I can't control something that I'm really motivated to control.
Yeah, totally. And the identity that goes with that, like you mentioned at the beginning, it's interesting. Luckily, I have the identity of I'm a really consistent person. And I know lots of clients and other people I work with just go, I keep trying and I just fall off the wagon and then I can't do it. And I'm like, just start again, it's fine. But I suppose you get that identity then when you fail in your habits, that then you get more depressed and then you think, oh, forget it. I'm never going to be able to make this work. So how did you manage to make that work in the end? Was it the sugar that helped, or what was it that helped you?
Oh, yeah, I did manage to give up the sugar and I did manage to have two babies, which takes me to today. And that was very successful. But it took me a really long time. And I think that's the thing we can really like press accelerate on this once we know the process. Yeah, I'd love to take you down the process, but give me a problem, first of all, Joe, of something we want to solve, because the sugar thing we can certainly keep dipping into. I'd love to solve something for your listeners or for you that feels real. And I'll give you the examples of the process.
Yeah, exciting. Well, I'm going to be really selfish here and start the wanting to exercise one, which hopefully we can all relate to. And I know it's not business wise, but that's what's on my mind right now, that I'm up a certain age where I should be doing weights, etc. And I just cannot seem to make myself do this, despite my just need to do this 10-minute kettlebell thing. I found a great YouTube. When I do it, I feel amazing. I've tried to set the bar low in this 10 minutes. But because I like doing my daily yoga in the morning, that then little 10 minutes is already gone. And therefore, I just can't seem to do this consistently.
Okay. So first of all, let's start at the very beginning. So I've just developed something called the Habits Compass. And the reason for that is because I found all other tools are linear in process, and this is not a linear process. It's something we're going to have to go round in a circle to and come back to time and time again. And I train with a guy called BJ Fogg, who most people haven't heard of. Most people have heard of James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. But BJ Fogg is kind of the godfather of habits. So he developed a process where you need three things are always present when you make a habit happen. And that is, stands for BMAP. So to make a behavior happen, we need motivation, ability, and a prompt. So when you describe your yoga habit, you've got all those three things going.
Let me check that one again just to make sure I heard it right. So motivation, ability, and a prompt.
Yeah.
If you're like me writing this down.
When we start with that, what I want, so you want to do weights, that's motivation. So that's our first thing. And I found that there's a beginning tripwire that we always begin with here. So we need to get really clear on our why. Like all good coaches, we know about getting clear on the why. So I would first thing ask you to be, why do you want to do weights? And you said, because I'm a woman of a certain age. Why? Because you're like, if it's like, I know I should, that's not personal enough. So we need to get really, really clear. Like, I want to be able to lift my future grandchildren, for example, something like really tangible. And we know how to do that as coaches. So then we make this error, like I did with the PCOS, that why and that motivation is going to carry us through. So if you think about it, we start with this huge amount of motivation. If you think of it like a basketball, but then most days we've got the motivation of a ping pong ball and it's nothing. So we think, I don't need to design any other process around this because I'm really clear on what I want to do. So I call it the motivation mirage, and it like trips us up on that very first step. So then what we need to do is we come back to that center of the why, but it doesn't carry us through. So we're clear on it. Now we need to, and we all know this, we need to make the step smaller. So the next point on the compass I say is we need to shrink it. So we need to shrink the kettlebell exercise. And you've already shrunk it. You said you've already got it really small. But most of us have a problem shrinking the next stage. So PCOS, I wanted to give up sugar. What I should have done was started with breakfast and just started with breakfast Monday to Friday. If I want to post on LinkedIn, I think that there's a whole big process. I think I just need to post on LinkedIn, but actually there's loads of steps to that. So the first thing I might do is start dictating my ideas to my AI bot. It's maybe the first habit that I need to start with. So most of us find it really difficult with that huge level of motivation to then break it down into a small step. And it doesn't feel very motivating, does it? When you're like, oh, I really want this. I really want this goal. So next we have to shrink it. And I find most people are really bad at that. And to give you an analogy of that, if I was to ask you to carry a bag of sugar across the kitchen, you just pick up the bag of sugar, carry it across. If I was to say, carry the bag of sugar across the kitchen, but you've got to do 1 grain of sugar at a time, you're like, oh my God, it's exhausting. And that's essentially what we're asking you to do. Next, we need to design for our worst days, not our best days. So I want you to think about the day when your schedule is ridiculous, your hormones are off, you've had a disaster client meeting, something's gone terribly wrong. Then where is your motivation at? So that is the point that we start our design from. Okay. So then, and I think I know where this is going wrong, we need to attach it to our day. So we've got this intention, it's a floating intention. And until we attach it to something, then it's not going to happen. And if we think about like our mobile phone going off saying, oh, it's time to do the kettlebell now, we'll just swipe it away. We just won't action it. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Have you ever used a timer?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not for my gym, actually, but for lots of other things. Like you might have, write my social posts in my calendar, which I've never done at the time I've put it in my calendar.
Yeah, exactly. So the best thing we can do now is we need a really clear prompt. Like as soon as I have my morning coffee and I close the dishwasher, then I'm going to pick up my kettlebell and swing it 3 times. Like, that's a really clear prompt. So you see, we've got the motivation, we've got the ability because maybe you know how to swing the kettlebell because you said you downloaded the video. And then we've got the prompt. We've made it really, really clear. So this is the next error that people make, and I call it attach it to your day, is we normally pick something which is really busy, like the morning, which is as busy as the M25 in my house. It's just not going to happen. And as you said, you were like, are you doing my yoga at that time? So that doesn't work. Can you think of a time of day which would consistently work Monday to Friday, or prompt that you could use either side of it? Can you think of that?
Yeah, I keep trying to think about lunchtime because when I was employed, I used to go to the gym every single lunchtime without fail because I suppose you had nothing else to do at lunchtime other than work through your lunch, which I didn't want to do. So that worked so well. So I keep thinking, gosh, why can't I just do it at lunchtime? But I've had that thought for ages and I have never done it at lunchtime. So clearly that one is not working for me. Like there's never a good time. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have the clear why? Or do you have, I'm getting personal now, but do you have a clear why for why you want to do it rather than just because I should?
No, I need to really think about the fact it is summer now and I will be going on holiday soon. I do want to look decent on holiday.
Absolutely. So I see this a lot. So people often pick holidays, and I help a lot of people with emotional eating, and they've often got a motivator of holiday. And the only problem with that is it's great for starting, but it's bad for continuing because then it doesn't become something that I'm going to carry on because we get back from holiday or we've already stopped the habit. So the habit is generally very fragile at the beginning. And something like going on holiday can disrupt it. So you need to go back to that stronger, deeper why. And at the moment, I'm struggling for why do you want to do it? And at the moment, that's lacking. It won't carry us through. I would suggest picking something that you already always do. So it might be like, I always brush my teeth, right? So you have a bedtime routine. So it would be something you do just before you go to bed. That often works. And the middle of the day is often really busy, but it could be something that you leave by the kettlebell by the kettle, and that you will do it 3 times every time you're waiting for the kettle to boil, because presumably you go make a coffee or whatever through the day.
I love that idea of leaving it somewhere handy rather than hidden in the spare room somewhere that I've got to think about trying to find the thing. So that's a super cool idea. Yeah, I like that. I could do that.
Okay, so kettle by the kettlebell, that works. And then it becomes like, I do it 3 times. So the next thing we have to do is feed it. We start with this very fragile habit and people think, oh, I started it, so now it's going to last. And that's what normally digs people into what I call the habit hole. Because you think, I'm going to do this, then I don't. Then I feel shame that I didn't do it. And because we've got this cultural idea, which comes from science, but if I just make it small enough and do 1% every day, I'm going to get better and better. And actually, that's not the reality, because small things, like I said, are really hard to do. So we need to be like, I can do hard things, and this is really hard. Going back to that sugar analogy of moving across the kitchen. So I can run a business, but I can't do the kettlebell. This is hard for me. But I can do hard things because I run a business. Like, that's the mantra that we get to, rather than thinking, oh, it should be easy, and now I'm in shame when I don't do it, because that's what blocks people from getting started again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So does this also work for people having the fear of, say, posting on social media? Like they might want the habit, but there's so much fear involved that they don't want to start the habit. How would you begin with someone that has a fear over whatever they want to create as a habit?
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to our 4th step on the habits compass, which is unblocking it, because we need to unblock it. So obviously we need to, first of all, have the skills and abilities to do a post, and technology is often a real blocker. So we might list out all those practical things that are going to block you from doing something. For example, I always ask people to move their mobile phone so it's not charging by their bed, because otherwise it's the first thing you look at in the morning, the last thing you look at night. But to do that, we're going to need probably an old mobile phone, if you like sleep stories or meditations, a notepad, you might even need a torch, you're going to need an alarm clock. So first of all, we have to unblock all those physical things. And one of those things, Joe, and why I came to you, is like clarity on what I'm trying to achieve on LinkedIn. It's a big blocker, because once I'm clear on that, I've removed that psychological blocker. But let's get into the fear, because the fear is a big one. You're worried people are going to judge you, what they're going to think. And I know who will be more successful on their habits based on how they're going to celebrate at the end. So if we're celebrating that I've got 4 likes, that's going to be a really difficult habit to build up. If I'm celebrating, I have just done a post, then that's going to be easier to build that habit. And the reason is that that sprinkles dopamine on those neural connections. That's what we're trying to make, neural connections. So it becomes like habit fertilizer. But probably there's still some, we're coaches, there's some underlying beliefs under that. So then I would, first of all, get people trying to do the habit, break it down to something really small. Like I said, just voice noting what are your ideas, first of all. Then maybe just collecting images. That's another thing that you could do to break that habit down to be smaller. Then just drafting the text. That's another one. So we've broken those down into much smaller pieces, but those underlying beliefs start to unravel, or we start to get more familiar with them once we try and do the habit. So when we try and do the habit, it doesn't work. We're often met with that voice. We all know that voice, the voice that says, you don't want to do that. You've got something more important to do, or you've not got time for this today. So I work with people to get really familiar with that voice. So I had one client, and she was on a weight loss mission. She's lost 4 stone. Part of that, she wanted to go to the gym, just like you. And the voice would come in so strong every time. You've not got time. You really shouldn't be doing this right now. So we named the voice Dragon Lady. Dragon Lady's trying to be helpful. She was trying to protect her from something, just as that voice tries to protect us from exposing ourselves online. So we have to thank the voice. Thank you. This is what I want. And that's why it's really helpful to have that why written down. Write down the points of the habit compass so that you can get really clear on what's going to come up. And visualize the voice appearing, because you know it's going to come up.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I love that because I had a session with my coaching supervisor recently where we did exactly that. You named this part, and she got me sitting in a different chair and trying to explain what that part is trying to protect you from. So it's great you go deep enough because I think the amount of books I've read on this and nothing changes. And it's so hard, isn't it? Because I suppose we probably just don't go deep enough on all of the fears.
Yeah, and I think we don't go deep enough because we've started with motivation, that motivation mirage that I'm talking about, and we think that's going to get us through. And then we think, why can't I? I'm useless. This is meant to be easy, and I can't even do the easy step. Hence, I'm in shame. And I can't then do the deep exploration to why it's not happening because that shame means I'm just going to withdraw from the whole thing.
Yeah, totally.
So I think the important thing when it comes to nailing that LinkedIn post is at each stage, you have to celebrate that you've written the voice note, or you have to celebrate you found the image. And it sounds so painful because you're like, people build huge businesses and you want me to celebrate just writing a voice note. And so what I find is we know the science is celebrate because that becomes the dopamine that we're sprinkling on the neural connection. Again, and maybe it's a cultural thing, we really withdraw from that. I'm not going to high five myself in the mirror for just posting on LinkedIn. It just feels pathetic. So instead, I ask people to notice what they've gained. So, for example, you've recorded a voice note of what you could post on LinkedIn. Do you just feel a little bit lighter? Does it just feel like, oh, I've done a bit of action? Or, oh, it's good to get those thoughts out of my mind and into a voice note. It's like when we don't eat the chocolate biscuit, our genes aren't immediately going to feel lighter. We're not going to reach what we're looking for in terms of the aim, but we have to acknowledge what we've done. So I find that people noticing their gains is much easier for them. Actual celebration. And then until we make a cultural shift to that, that's the way I'm going to keep going with it because I think it's more helpful. So if you're swinging the kettlebell 3 times, it's stop and then really notice how does your body feel now? How is my energy? And what do I notice in my thoughts? And that's the key. And often we delay that to what were my wins of the week, which is really, really important. That doesn't lay down the habit.
Oh, I love it. Totally. So you touch on something so important there, which is the dopamine, which is the thing that ruins most of our lives, especially with social media and things like that, and using any other distraction we can because you know you're going to get that immediate hit. So I love the idea of noticing, as you know, in the program, we do a lot of share your wins and that type of thing. But you're right, it's so important to keep looking and sharing them in the moment as well, even seemingly small things, because it honestly is the key to success. Like I bought a gratitude journal when I started my business, and I gift one now to my clients because noticing and being grateful made such an impact on my life, especially in the beginning when there's not much to be grateful for and you're not really getting the clients in and you're taking all this nightmare action and you're not getting the buzz from it. And you touch on something super important there, which is just keep noticing the wins, what's good. And I honestly think you attract more of it. On that one, then, tell us more about the dopamine and how we can then stop checking once we've posted our post, then being so obsessed by heading into LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever it is we're posting to get that little red indicator that something's happened. I've got some sort of reward after what I've done there.
Yeah, well, Joe, you're speaking my language because I really, really struggle with this. And I think we need to, first of all, move that narrative that there's something wrong with me to understanding that this is purely biological and we're just tapping into to an ancient survival system that has existed for so long. Just to give you a bit of information about how strong dopamine is, there's this brilliant study where they removed dopamine receptors from rats. They genetically engineered them so they didn't have dopamine receptors. And then if they placed food a body length away from the rat, it wouldn't get up to eat the food. And instead, it was so powerful that it would die, even with the food in front of it. And I think we often think about dopamine as pleasure, but dopamine is actually this molecule of motivation to move towards something. So the rat wouldn't move towards the food without it. And I think that's a really important distinction because we often think, oh, I'm just chasing pleasure. But actually, every time you get that little dopamine hit, you're rewarding your body and the body knows to go after that. So what happens is we get that little hit of dopamine. And it's a bit, if you imagine a wave pool, this is the best thing I've ever heard it described. When we get that little hit, it's like the wave goes over the pool because it's like a short, sharp thing. But if you were to do a big weights exercise or do something really hard, then the dopamine rises in the pool. So then we get a higher baseline of dopamine. So that's how I like to understand it. So when we're doing our quick checks, we're actually exhausting ourselves because we're throwing the water out the pool. So we can't help it. We're wired to go towards the dopamine because it's our survival mechanism, but also we're depleting ourselves. So how do we not check? Well, we're hardwired to check. We're hardwired to go after that. So the only thing I think you have to do is you have to do all those physical moves. The phone has to go, so you can't reach it. The locks have to go on. We've talked about the Opal app. The Opal app needs to go on. And then the timer needs to go on. So you're like, I'm going to get this task done. Now, you could reward yourself by checking the end of doing another task. So I'm going to write my new LinkedIn profile, put 30 minutes on the clock, and I'm playing a game with myself. I'm not going to check LinkedIn until I get to the end of that point. Rather than I'm quickly, this has got hard, and now I'm going to check because that's what we standardly do. So I've reached a block. I don't know what to do now. So now I'm going to check, which is that self-soothing moment. So it's just like having a square of chocolate. I'm self-soothing in the moment.
That's exactly what I do. As soon as it gets hard, whatever I'm trying to do, I will just try and switch. I'll try and go on social media to escape that hard feeling. So what would be the way in that moment when that next happens, when I'm like, trying to write an article or do something that I really need to get done and I need to escape?
Yeah, great question. Well, the best thing you could do is have your kettlebell by your desk. Be like, I need to escape. I'm going to reach for the social media, click it, and then gently say to yourself, and use your first name, Joe, you're trying to escape. Let's do something else. Pick up the kettlebell, swing it 3 times, and then go back to the task. Because that would be the harder thing to do. It's going to raise your dopamine, but it would also be that distraction. So you could actually marry the two together to help you build that, but it would be like right by your desk. So labeling and noticing is the first part of habit formation. And people often ask me, how do I break a bad habit? And actually, those words are, as coaches, we know words are helpful or unhelpful. And those words are really unhelpful because the reason you form that habit is because you had a need. I need to self-soothe in the moment. I need to distract myself. And that worked. And it's the quickest route and the most easiest thing to do. But if you put yourself in other discomfort, then you're probably going to get more work done. Probably going to get that post written or be able to redo the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I need to get several kettlebells all over the house.
That would be a good move.
I could be fit in no time if I did that instead of scrolling on my phone anytime I wanted to escape.
Yeah. I would say just that noticing, just, Joe, you're trying to escape. What else can I do? Or Joe, you're low in energy. What else can I do? So I have a dip in energy mid-afternoon, like most people. And if I do a 10-minute NSDR meditation, I don't reach for the sugar. But if I don't, I'll reach for the sugar. And both energize me. So one is the harder thing to do and one is the easiest thing to do. So as long as I'm like, Rebecca, you're low in energy, I'm having the sugar and I know exactly what I'm doing. Or Rebecca, you're low in energy, I'm going to do the 10-minute meditation. Like just the labeling can really help.
Oh, I cannot wait. So, so exciting to do that. So, is there anything we haven't covered yet?
I would say that what's most important to know is that most things we refer to as habits aren't actually habits. So in our business, we have to do, and what we do on your program, Joe, is a lot of one-time actions. And people think that they're habits, and they're not, because unless it's got prompt and we're doing it consistently, then it's not really a habit. So, for example, redoing my LinkedIn profile is a one-time action. Deciding my niche client is a one-time action. Deciding my pricing, one-time action. And you can use motivation for one-time actions, but you can't use motivation to get you to build a habit. So we need all those steps when it comes to building a habit, but we don't need all those steps for a one-time action. So for example, if you just had a client win, you could say, right, I've got my list of my hard one-time actions, client win, energy's high, motivation's high, I'm going to tackle one of those. And getting really clear on your why and then doing your one-time action does work because it's a shorter thing to do. Obviously, we still have the same blockers and the same fears, but I think that's an important distinction to make. So when you list out what habits you need to have in your business, it's actually not that many because there's not many really repetitive tasks. One of the things I would say is we need to have the habits that bring our energy, that mean we can cut off from work because, I mean, coaching business is like having a baby, isn't it? It's like you think about it all the time. So what can you do to energize yourself and to wind down? So I have 8 habits. I call them the habit handrails, 4 to do in the morning and 4 to do in the evening. And I think as coaches, it's really important that we're able to look after ourselves. So embedding those are really important.
I love that idea. And I want to quickly get into it a little bit more because I do think, and I once heard, especially in COVID, that it was really good for people to take a walk, say at the end of the day, to signal that they had finished work, because obviously we were suddenly working at home and no one had that commute anymore. And the sad thing as solo business owners is often we're working from home, so we never really get that switch off. So tell us more about how we can do that self-care. What are these habit rails, I think you call them, and how can I get them?
Yeah, it's probably a whole other podcast. So I give you the top ones and we can come back to it another day if you like. Follow me on social media, but I'm going to keep dropping them in and get that LinkedIn habit absolutely nailed. But I would say my top one is not to charge your mobile phone by your bed. So your one-time action after listening to this is to go out and buy an alarm clock because most of us are using our phones as an alarm clock. So I would make your bedroom phone free if at all possible. And the reason for that is because it drains your dopamine. It keeps you awake that like half an hour longer scrolling. If your phone is the first thing you touch when you wake up in the morning, you're already hardwiring yourself to be like, I'm going to keep checking it all day long. So the longer you can delay that checking the phone. So I heard this brilliant phrase the other day, sky before screens. So if we move our mobile phone out of our bedroom, when we wake up in the morning, one of the first things we want to do is drink a pint of water. So most of us are really dehydrated, especially when the coach is talking all day. We want to delay that caffeine intake just a little bit if possible, because otherwise we have a dip later on in the afternoon on caffeine. So an hour, 2 hours after waking would be ideal. And there's all sorts of science around that, but really it's about cortisol. So cortisol is often considered the stress hormone. Actually, cortisol is that hormone of energy, and we want it to rise in the morning as it naturally will. So if you can get outside as early as possible when you've woken, you're going to raise your cortisol level, which means it'll have a nice drop-off curve throughout the day, which is like your insurance policy. You're going to have all these little blips when stressful things happen, but as long as we've had that big spike at the beginning of the day, it's not going to rise higher than that spike. So we want to get outside, and getting outside into daylight raises that cortisol spike. You don't need the coffee to do that. And then once we're outside, we get this blue light, blue rays of light hitting the back of our retina. Now, our retina absorbs that, turns it into serotonin, and at night it turns it into melatonin, which helps us sleep better, particularly when the phone's not by the bed. So you can see how those habits stack on each other to be like, I need to get up, I need to go outside. And then if we can have that morning walk or move outside, we get what's called forward ambulation, which just means walking, which means you calm the amygdala, that alert part of the brain, because you've got images moving past you, and causes the amygdala to calm down. So if we step those things together, we really get some traction going. So that's what I get people to do, to stack the habits on top of each other. And I use those science-based habits to make sure we're getting the best out of our day.
Oh gosh, what an amazing thing to finish on. I'm actually motivated to not to have the coffee. I usually go straight downstairs, have coffee immediately. I'm now wondering if I can go downstairs, straight outside, do the kettlebell in the garden.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's a great time of year. We're recording this in April. So, daylight wise, this is brilliant. So, if we want to start a daylight habit, this is the time for you to do it. It gets really hard, obviously, in January and February, but it gets even more important. Yeah, all that great stuff. I mean, who doesn't need the sleep? Who doesn't need the insurance policy against the stress? These are the very basics that we should do. And we're so quick to lean for those, I don't know, the gummies or the vitamins that we see on Instagram that promise all those things. Actually, these basic habits get you those things.
Love it. So, so excited to get started, Rebecca. So, if people want to go further into their habits, where can they find you and how can you help?
So LinkedIn is where I hang out, and I have a 4-session habit accelerator program, which I always welcome people to do. So if they want to book a coffee to discuss what that is and how it goes about, then I help people craft habits for their worst days, not their best days. I'm ruthlessly practical in my design, and I have a bank of habits that really work, but it's about designing for the individual. So that's essentially what we do. I've got children, I've got this, I've got that. We work around all of that. And then I run a program called Rooted Tuesdays with another coach, and that will start again in September. It's a 12-week course where we go through those basic habits and we build them one habit a week. And that's a very low cost offer if there's any coaches that need that energy and that creativity to get going.
Oh, I love it. I really do think our habits create our life. So, this is such important, exciting, interesting work because your business is often built and your life, happiness is often built on these tiny habits that we end up spending hardly any time researching and trying to figure out how to make them happen more often. So, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. Any final words if someone's leaving this episode today? What's the first thing you would recommend?
First thing I would recommend is write those habit compass points down. So I'll just recap them now. So get clear on your why as the middle of the compass. Then we need to shrink it. So write down as many ideas as you can to shrink that action. Then we need to attach it to your day. So write down all the different times of day that you could possibly come up with, all the different prompts that you could possibly engineer to attach it. Then we need to unblock it. So you need to picture all the things that are going to get it in the way. Think about your worst days. And then finally, we need to feed it. So you need to notice your gains when you do the action. That is not a linear process. You will need to keep going back to those points. And that's why it's so important to write them down, because when it goes wrong, you might need to shrink it further, or you might need to go do some more work on the unblocking it. And we'll have ideas of what's going to get in the way. My husband, my kids, all these things are going to get in the way. But actually, when we start doing the habit and we hear the voice, we can really get underneath it. And I'm speaking coaches here. So you can do that work, or you can work with somebody else to accelerate that. So I would say, once you get stuck, which you will, expect it as part of the process, to go reach out to somebody and discuss it with them.
Yeah, I think so, because we might be coaches, but we just can't often coach ourselves. It's the hardest thing to do. So thank you so, so much, Rebecca.